So, I mean, I can't deny that they have connections to me because they came out of my head. And I don't think that you ever know what it's like to be someone else as completely as you know what it's like to be yourself, which is a huge problem with being a person, although also really good in some ways. It makes it really hard for us to connect as deeply as we would like to connect with each other, and for other people to kind of apprehend our wonderfulness, and in turn for us to apprehend theirs, although that's less of a problem. But it's also advantageous in some ways. So, I mean, some of the characters are very much like my high school self, like Ben in Paper Towns, who's really, he calls girls honey bunnies, and he has all of these, like, romantic strategies that are terrible, and but he's very confident until a girl wants to kiss him, and then, you know, he just, like, runs away like a little child. That's very much like my high school self. And then the character who I probably personally connect to the most in terms of feelings in any of my novels is Alaska, because I felt very self-destructive in high school and very out of control, and like I didn't have any like tether. So I felt like everyone else was tied to the ground in a way that I wasn't, and that was scary to me. And so I connect to her, although I'm not hot or a girl. But yeah, but all of them I think have facets of me. I try not to write a character who I don't care about and who I can't empathize with. As far as do I feel like I'm reverting to my high school self? Not really. I feel like I'm nobody. I mean, that's what I like about writing, is that I feel like all of my personhood goes away, which is nice because I hate all of that. Like I can't. That's what makes it so hard for anybody, I think. So I feel like I'm floating in the sky and nothing is happening, the way drug addicts feel when they're on drugs, I think.
So writing's an addiction for you?
It's an addiction, yeah, but yeah, I guess. But an addiction that I find it amazingly easy to give up at times.
So I was going to ask you actually where the characters of Alaska and Margot came from. So there's quite a bit of you in Alaska. What about in Margot, in Paper Towns?
Well, two things. First, Margot is kind of a response to Alaska, to the novel Looking for Alaska, because I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the plot of Alaska is such that the kind of mystery and majesty of this girl who is being talked about by a boy and therefore being put on a pedestal, that lie is kind of never punctured in Looking for Alaska. Like, just the arc of the novel is such that the lie of people who are more than people is never punctured. And that began to trouble me, partly because of my book, but also partly because of other books that became popular in the interim years, where there would be these characters who were godlike romantic others, and who never had to pee, and who sparkled in the sunshine. And I became really fascinated by this idea that like there could be a legitimate romantic other who was so far from being a human, not just in the sense of being a vampire, but in the sense of being like ridiculous, and that we could still find that like that they revealed something about the way we are when we are attracted to someone, which is that we literally think that they sparkle in the sunshine and don't pee. So that's part of where Margot came from. I wanted to write a story in which that lie was revealed. And then partly there was this guy I went to high school with named John Malden, who was just amazing. And I'm just completely enthralled with him. And he did all this kind of, like, when we were in high school, John Malden, we were juniors, so you cannot travel to Cuba if you are American. It is illegal. And you certainly cannot do business in Cuba. It is super illegal. Junior year, I was working at Baskin-Robbins, which is an ice cream shop, and it was June 3rd, like the second day of summer, and I was working at Baskin-Robbins, and John Malden came by, and I was like, you know, working this summer, you don't have a job? He said, I got something. I'm working on something. And I was like, you got like McDonald's? What do you got lined up? And he buys 200 pairs of Levi jeans. He puts them in 6 suitcases. He drives to Mexico. He flies to Cuba with his 6 suitcases. He sells the blue jeans on the black market in Havana. He flies back to Mexico, drives back to Alabama where we were living at the time, and on like June 8th, comes to work, buys like a double scoop of Haagen-Dazs ice cream with 4 of the $6,000 that he made in the last 3 days. That's the kind of person John Malden is. He now runs like a Turkish pomegranate juice concern. Yeah. He was arrested in Afghanistan right after 9/11. That's the kind of life that John Malden has had. They were like, "Why are you here?" And he was like, "It's awesome. This is the Silk Road. This is where everything meets."
Has anybody got another one? Another question, please. Got the microphone this time.
Percy, prep fencing. You have an advantage.
Hold it close.
Yeah, you talk about sort of the connectedness because of the internet. Do you feel that you wouldn't be able to write World Racing if it hadn't been for the internet?
Well, I couldn't have written any of my novels without the internet. This is literally true with all of them. I would not know all the last words of all the famous people who are. My first novel, Looking for Alaska, is about a guy who memorizes the last words of famous people, which I also do. But because of the internet, I have access to far more last words than any normal person ever would, pre-internet. Paper towns, I would never have found out about the idea of paper towns, about this weird cartographic phenomenon of copyright traps without the internet. And indeed, that's something that was only known to cartographers until the internet sort of broke the story WikiLeaks style. And An Abundance of Catherines I couldn't have written because I don't know how to anagram. And this book is all about anagrams. And there are...
come up with those anagrams?
No, God, no! What do you think I am, some kind of genius?
Yes.
No, I use the internet. I use the rearrangement servant, which anagrams to Internet Anagram Server. And my poor Dutch translator was there. I visited her at her house, and she was there with a Scrabble board, patiently anagramming. And I was like, "Oh, they got a Dutch version of this website. I'll show it to you." Just furious with me for not mentioning that earlier. But no, I couldn't write my novels without the internet. And I think that's an interesting thing about contemporary fiction is that it's become so linked. But the world is no longer separable from the internet. I mean, is this thing happening here an internet thing or a real life thing? It's very difficult to say because it wouldn't happen without the internet. But it seems to be happening in real life. So, it's both. That's an interesting question.
Another one. Do you want to go?
In the back?
Further back.